Start the recording as I just started it now, so we are recording, so we're good to go. All right. So, again, this is sponsored by the Longmont Radio Club. And again, a ham shack is different for everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some different ham shacks. Some people are going to discuss their ham shacks. Some are just pictures that people sent me. We've got a couple people that are going to present as well and talk about their ham shacks. We'll start with mine and things like that. Again, if you have questions, this is kind of high level. So I know when I brought this topic up at some of the nets, people started asking general questions, and that's not really what this is. It's not a general question type presentation. It's more of a very high level. I will try to answer if I can, but we won't go in depth to things like grounding and that type of stuff. That would be its own topic in itself. It could take several presentations to get through grounding or antennas and things like that. So just like I said, it's kind of a high level. Something I thought we'd try for the first time. It was kind of easier to put together for the club presentation to see. So again, a ham shack could be as simple as sitting on the couch with your little Balfang. So easy, even a puppy can do it. So this is Con. This is my ham dog. And unfortunately, he's not in here this evening. He's probably laying with Mom. But again, ham shack is what you make of it. And even as a new ham, you don't have to go out extravagant and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to build a ham shack. If you can, that's great. If you want to, that's great. Otherwise, just a little Balfang, sit next to you, get on the radio. And any place could be your ham shack. I got a couple more cute pictures too here. So same thing with kitties. Kitties sitting there in a chair, just be on the radio. That could be the little ham shack. This one likes to play in a box. So whether you have your own little room or you have to share with somebody, ham shack is what you make it. So this is a little video that I did. Start with it, and I'm hoping everybody can hear it. If not, but it kind of goes through my antennas in my backyard. So we can get started. If you don't hear it, that's fine too. It'll be in the recording. Maybe it might play. Let's see. Why is this not playing? Well, it played earlier and it's not now. So it'll be in the, I will make sure it gets added presentation so people can see it. But basically, it's just a picture of my antennas, and I'll describe them really quick since the video is not playing. I do live in an HOA. So I'm under the philosophy myself, at least when it comes to the HOA, it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. So, everybody got unmuted here.
My first double run, the very last hand.
So, what I do is my stuff's not permanently mounted, so I don't have a tower on the ground or anything like that. I use aluminum masts for a lot of my antenna for my towers, and I have I have what was an old 30-foot retractable flagpole that I have in the backyard. Currently, it corroded over the wintertime, so I had to cut it down. It's down to about 15 feet now. But I have an inverted V dipole hanging off of, so it sits in the backyard, the fence line, and runs down along the edge of the fence lines. And it's a G5RV full length, not the junior, so it's 52 feet on each side, but I have it fully stretched out. I also have an octopus dipole antenna in the back. It currently has 20 and 40 meters on it. I have to fill the other two. I just haven't got the ham sticks for it yet. And I have my EdFong UHF VHF antenna on about a 16-foot mast, along with a 1090 megahertz one that I'm tracking airplanes with, ADBS. And then I also have a NOAA weather satellite antenna that I built. It's a 120-degree V on a PVC pipe and just pointing south. And it actually gets some decent pictures sometimes. A lot of them are garbage, but sometimes I do get some decent picture NOAA 15, and I believe 18, and sometimes 19. So those are my antennas that I play with outside. I also have my satellite antennas, which I gave her another presentation that I put in my with the camera over there a little bit and show it. That I was playing with here in the ham shack. So that's that describes the system, and like I said, I'll make sure this gets put in. All right, let's see if this is going to advance to the next one. Helps if I get on the right screen here. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over to Ron, and I'm going to let Ron talk about his ham shack, and then we got two more people that are going to talk about theirs. So hang on one second, Ron. I'm going to stop sharing here, and then I will make you center all yours. You're already a presenter, Ron, and you're already unmuted. So go ahead, sir. It's all yours.
Can you see the my picture? Can you hear me? And you can see the picture?
Everybody see your picture?
Okay, great. So I thought rather than making everyone dizzy, as I move the camera around, I would just highlight the stuff that people might be interested in. This is a stack of most of my radios. The one that I think most people are interested in is in the upper right, the Flex Radio SDR. And as I've described it to some of you in a club, it doesn't have knobs on it, and it really is less a radio than a supercomputer. All it has coming out of it is a Ethernet cable, and the RF antenna is going directly in. And you'll see on the next slide what the front end looks like on the computer screen itself. Down below that, I've got an MFJ SWR meter, and the ASU is a fantastic radio for VHF, UHF. It has a touch screen, has a great user interface. It's not cheap, but it really is a nice radio there. Then on top of it, on the left, I have my packets. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but it looks like you're not sharing the picture. So you share your screen and
slides,
because
okay.
All we see is you.
I asked that earlier. Let's see, what do I do here?
They meant seeing you, not the slide. Sorry.
So how do I?
There should be a button at in your things there that says share.
Okay, hold on.
Content, or you can go up to share at the top. Share content.
Show me where. Tell me where I go to share content.
Do you have like a menu bar at the top that says file, edit, share at the top?
No. Oh, yes, I do.
Go to share and then share content.
It's disabled.
Disabled?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
They're all grayed out.
Oh. Try it now.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
So
presenters would still be able to share.
Screen. Now, do you see my screen?
Now we see your screen.
Okay. Let me maximize this here. Okay, so that's why there weren't any questions. So the upper right again is the Flex Radio. Down below it's the watt meter, the ASU going around counterclockwise. And that little flat thing is a packet set, which I use for sending digital packet for BCARES and other activities. And then there's an antenna rotator and a preamplifier for my magnetic loop that we'll talk about in a moment. So go on next slide. The Flex SDR radio, as I mentioned, is less a radio than it is a supercomputer, and it displays everything on a computer screen. So here's my primary computer screen. The Flex radio with its pan adapter waterfall is in the upper left. You can see it's very graphical. And one of the big benefits of the SDR radios over the older generation radios is the fact you can see what's going on. This can show 16 megabytes worth of, maybe more, bandwidth on the screen. I think it's 50 megahertz, I'm sorry, a bandwidth at any point in time. So no more spinning the dial in order to see whether you're missing somebody on a frequency right above or below you. The middle of the screen is on FT8, so you can see the packet transmissions going on there. And the horizontal line across the Flex radio screen is kind of interesting. That is noise. So not only can you see signals, you can see noise, and somebody is tuning up or whatever. Maybe that's a radar signal scanning frequencies and so forth. So that's the front end of my radio. In the upper right there is the WSJTX waterfall. Those of you that have run digital modes in FT8, I will recognize that. And I've got a pretty good antenna system here, despite also being in an HOA, and I can completely max out the AlertX system with 40 or more transmissions simultaneously. So that little white window below the waterfall is showing me the decodes from around the world that I picked up on that last 20-second cycle or so. And down below that is a primary WSJTX screen. It's again showing the reception of all the different stations I'm picking up. Going around counterclockwise, the needed spots area is highlighting for me both verbally through the speaker and also on the screen there, people that it's decoded that I want for my logging and awards going through the ARRL or other awards. So I can just leave this running in the background behind me, and if it sees something, if it decodes something that I really need for an award, then it will pull it up. And then some people ask what people use for logging. I use Log4OM. It's relatively inexpensive. It may be free. I've forgotten at this point. And it has the clusters in it, so it will go around the world and pick up people who are reporting logs. And I can also click one button, and it will transfer my logs directly up to ARRL or other areas there. So you can see a lot of activity going on one screen there. Any questions on the information on this screen here? Okay, good. So what I use as the front end is a little computer. Some of you may be familiar with the Intel NUC, Next Unit Computing. This is a Intel-based computer, and what Intel has done is try to jam as much power as they can into the smallest box they can as a benchmark, not using much power. These are fantastic little computers. This is an i7, I think it's an 8th generation computer, and it is very, very fast. I try to stay as far away from Windows as I can. A lot of the software I run for the radio side is Windows-based. So I run Ubuntu, which is Linux, as the primary operating system on the computer. And then I run Windows on top of that in a VMware image. The advantage of that is if something breaks in Windows, I can simply delete the files, copy over a backup set, and I have a Windows up and running again with all my software without having to do a restore on the computer. So those of you that are interested in how to accomplish that, you can reach out to me later, and I'll show you how to do that. So that little computer there is about 8 inches by 1 inch tall by maybe 5 inches deep. It's got a lot of ports on the back of it. My whole shack here, in fact, my whole office is running on solar power. I do that for BCARES and for emergency communications. I am part of the BCARES emergency group. I'm also in net control for the National Weather Service and other activities. So I have a large 300 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery in here running off of solar power on the roof with automatic failover. So again, all of my equipment runs directly off the sun. And I laugh when the power goes out because I just keep on going along with my internal network. The backyard has a couple different antennas in it. You may or may not see this with the resolution of the screen, but this is a 80-meter end-fed antenna going through the trees with about, I'm guessing, a 100-degree kink halfway through it out there. So it's not by any means a fantastic antenna. This is my transmit antenna, and I am able to effectively use it on 10 meters up through 80, even up to 160 to a certain amount. So we're on open space in the back, but we are in an HOA, so we had to do something that minimize the visibility to the HOA board. They haven't complained about this at all yet. So this is my primary transmit antenna. Some of you have seen my presentations in the club before. This is my primary receive antenna. It's a magnetic loop antenna. It's receive only. That little box at the bottom of it is a preamplifier, so I can't transmit into this, otherwise I would blow it up. It has a couple of advantages. The loop does not work any better up high than down low. So I could put this thing up to 50 feet. It wouldn't work any better than it does 3 or 4 feet above the ground. Secondly, it's omnidirectional for receive purposes. So I don't really need to spin it around very much to pick up the stations like you would on a Yagi. However, it does have a couple of sharp nulls, very sharp nulls, 180 degrees off the axis of the loop there. And that allows me to null out a station I don't want to listen to or a noise source. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. I don't need to move it around a lot, but I can null out something that I want. And it is extremely sensitive. We've presented some of the results of this a year or so ago. It comes close to matching some of the better antennas that people in the club have, up 40, 50 feet. And it really takes a Yagi or something close to that to match the receive performance of this particular antenna. So this together with that transmit antenna in an HOA really has given me a really reasonable performance. And I think I'm up to about 260 DXCC entities, countries around the world, and all of the states on all 5 bands. So it's been fairly successful. So this is on a post, a little concrete pier I poured into the ground there. We do get in North Boulder here winds up to 100 miles an hour. So it's been up there for 5 years, never touched it, and it seems to be holding up really well. All of the antennas and the solar panels are going through a lightning protection system. This box on the edge of the house here goes directly down to a ground strap and to the ground stakes going into the edge of the house there. Most of you know, I hope, that you don't want to ground your radio to the ground pin of your power plugs in the house. It's going to create more havoc than it's going to solve. So again, everything is going directly through here. Close up of the inside of the box. That round thing outside the box on the lower left is a bunch of MOVs. It's a lightning protection device for the solar panels. And you can see the different devices there going through for the rotator and the different antennas that are coming through the box here, and the grounding strap. So that little black one in the middle of the receive antenna there, that actually blew to bits a couple of years ago, and I didn't have any damage all in the house. There was molten metal on the side of this box, so it apparently did its purpose. And so lightning protection really is pretty important for the equipment here. And that's everything I had. I hope I didn't make anybody dizzy because I didn't move the camera around. Any questions on any of this material?
Ron, there is 2 questions.
Yeah.
In the chat. It says, is it a Biosino power battery or what?
It is a Bio-Enno battery. Those batteries have a very good discharge curve. A lot of the lead acid batteries that we use in our cars, the voltage sags as we put on a load on it. And even though the car doesn't mind if the battery gets down to 11 or 10 or 9 volts to start it, our equipment does. It will completely go dead. And it's not good for the electronics to have the voltage sag like that. So this battery goes directly almost to the end of its discharge, and it goes from 12, 12, 12, 12 for maybe 40 hours, and it drops directly down only at the very end. It also has its charging circuit built into it. All these batteries do. So that you can't overcharge them, you can't over discharge them. All you do is put basically a straight 14.5 volts into it till the end of time off of solar panels or whatever. You don't need to worry about cycling the batteries or anything else. They seem to do a really good job. So I moved from a bunch of batteries to one big 300 amp hour battery that will run my shack for a long time off of the 2 solar panels I've got on the roof. That answered the question.
And there was one other question. How do you deconflict the 2 antennas, transmit and receive?
Fortunately, my SDR receiver, my SDR radio has different ports on it. So they're coming into the different antenna ports, and the radio itself does all that work for me. It has a receive only port for the mag loop antenna, and no RF gets into it. Although I do have some protection circuit circuitry on the feed lines just to make sure that it doesn't get through the coax shield back to that receive antenna. So the radio does all that work for me.
All right, that's the only two questions I saw. Now, we'll turn it over to, we should see it, Brian is next. Let me, I think you can unmute yourself, Brian.
I just did.
You should be able to go ahead and share content. It should take over if you want.
Hello? I had a question. I had a question for Ron before you go.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ray Warren. Ron, I just wanted to ask you about that NUC, I guess you call it NUC computer. And I wondered if you had checked into Raspberry Pi, something really cheap, because this one looks, I looked online, it looks really expensive, like $1,000.
Well, they're in a whole different class. I have some Raspberry Pi 4s, and I do some of the microwave functions on them. This is a high-speed desktop computer, so it would run rings around that other device there. Now, they do come in different configurations, so you can get less expensive ones, but this is, again, about as fast as you can get, short of a gaming machine.
And then we did have one other question that popped up on the chat. It says, you don't get bleed through from the outside antenna directly into the mag receive antenna?
No, the Flex Radio has really good isolation. In fact, I can even run it in duplex mode where I can receive and transmit at the same time. So it doesn't seem to be a problem. It just depends on the radio. Now, that's an expensive radio, too. I put all my money in, most of my money into that one radio because it is so many great features. I don't have a lot of HF radios hanging around like some of the people in the club do. So no, it has not been a problem.
Right. Thank you. Go ahead and keep those questions coming if you want on the chat. And then, all right, Brian, it's up to you, sir.
Hey, can you guys hear me and see my screen?
I see it.
Okay, I'll get going here. I guess one of the things I have that may be different than a lot of members, I'm lucky that my wife is also involved in amateur radio. So a lot of times we hear, oh, my wife wouldn't let me do that. Or on the last Hamlet Net, we actually heard my husband doesn't like that. So luckily, I don't have to deal with that too often. So it kind of split up. My station kind of has four main areas, and I'll show some pictures on this. I was going to do a live video, but based on our testing a little bit earlier this morning, I was running into some problems with that, so I just made some slides here. So this is kind of just an overview of our setup. We built it on at the bottom there's just a regular 6-foot folding table, like those banquet tables you see anywhere. And then Kat and I built the wooden shelves above it. Got to do some woodworking and stuff, which is out of my comfort zone as well, but I think it came out pretty good. It hasn't tipped over or crashed in about 3 years so far, so I think we did all right. And then also below the bottom two shelves there's some LED light strips, because the room I'm in only has one overhead light, so it's not very bright, so lighting was kind of an issue. And this is kind of the same table from the other direction. You can see there's some computer monitors there. I've got 2 monitors on my station PC, which is Windows. The monitor at the upper left is hooked up to a Raspberry Pi. And in the back there, I put up a bulletin board, thought I was going to put all kinds of useful stuff on it, but ended up piling up radios and stuff in front of it. So, but it has my little list with my old call sign there. That's one thing we ran into that we tell people in our classes is, you know, especially when you're starting out, you get on a contest or something or start trying to make contacts and, you know, you're going to forget your call sign or maybe forget the phonetics or something. So we wrote all that stuff out when we were getting started, and it still comes in handy. So here's a couple of radios I have that I got for doing VHF and UHF satellite. They're just single band radios. They're Kenwood old radios back from probably the 1980s or so, but they're all modes. So they'll do single sideband, CW, FM, and I can run data over them as well. I've got them connected up so that I can control them via serial connection. So I can, get the modes and stuff off of them or set frequencies, hook them up to a satellite tracking program such as Orbitron, and it'll automatically compensate for the Doppler shift as the satellites are tracking over me. On the left, there are a couple of SignalLink USB interfaces. Again, these are pretty old radios, so they're not like the 7300 where you just plug a USB cable into it and you've got your audio and control. So those go into the computer with the audio from the radio and then the audio back to the radio. These radios are connected to a couple of egg beater antennas that are located up in the attic. And then I've also got a USB software-defined radio over here as well. This one might be a little hard to see some of the radios, but I've got a bunch of VHF, UHF mobile radios that I kind of use for base station radios. At the bottom is a Kenwood D710 dual band that has GPS, and it also has TNC capability in it, so it can do packet directly out of the radio. It's a slightly earlier version than the radio that we have in the Club's Go box. I've got an ICOM, just a straight dual band mobile, was one of the first VHF, UHF mobile radios I bought. And it's just connected to a dual band mag mount antenna that's up on a shelf, and it's stacked, it's on top of another radio, so it kind of has a metal ground plane for that. That mic that's sitting there, I kind of made some little brackets and put a magnet on them, and then that's able to hold on to the metal clip of the microphone as a mic holder. And then also those two boxes above the microphone are audio DSPs for the satellite radios. Again, being old radios, they don't have any fancy digital signal processing or not a lot of audio filtering on them. So those are kind of external boxes that do a little bit of that. And then heading over to the right, we have kind of the HF portion of the station. It's built around a Kenwood TS440 radio, which is, again, back from the 80s or so. One of the things I like about it, in contrast to some of the other radios, is every function on it has its own knob or button or switch. There's no menus on it. You don't have to remember any funky, button sequences to hold something down for 2 seconds to do something. It was real nice for getting started with, and it's also nice. We use it as a demo in our classes for students that you basically, you can look at the radio and get a feel for how it's configured, what the settings are, and it's real easy to make changes to it. The other thing I figured is, since it's kind of on older technology, it's got a lot of through-hole components and bigger wiring and components in it. So I figured if I ever did have problems with it, I'd have a chance of being able to fix it versus all the teeny tiny surface mount stuff. But of course, the downside of that is a lot of the components it uses aren't made anymore. So it's got pluses and minuses. But anyway, on this radio, I've also got it connected up to a PC via serial port for control, and then that little box kind of right above it. Oh, I guess I can, the laser pointer maybe. This little box up here does an audio connection to and from the PC. I've got another one of those Radio Shack DSP boxes because, again, this radio lacks a lot of the more advanced filtering. The boxes over here, there's a Radio Shack SWR meter. It's a digital SWR and power. I've got a thing here called it's an MFJ matchmaker. What it essentially does is it helps you to tune your antenna. I originally had a manual antenna tuner, and it is kind of puts out a static, basically a static type signal, and then you adjust your antenna tuner until that signal is at its maximum power, basically, and then that means your antenna is resonant. It's kind of a neat little box, although now I've got an automatic tuner for that. The one above it is something called a tuner pulsar, and what that does, I have a tube amplifier right above this, and when you're tuning up the amplifier, you want to transmit a signal, but if you're transmitting a constant signal, like, say, for example, a CW signal, if you just hold your code key down, eventually, if you take too long to tune, it can, cause damage to your amplifier, especially if you're feeding that power into, if it's very unmatched settings to your antenna. So what this thing does is it kind of pulses the CW key, like sending a bunch of DITs really fast. So it essentially lowers the duty cycle on your amplifier. Let's see, down here, we've got two CW keyers. Those are primarily used by my wife, Kat. She's doing CW on stuff. But this is a memory keyer. You can actually program in sequences of Morse code, like, say, your call sign, or maybe if you're in a contest, if there's a contest exchange. You can program it in, and then you just press one of these red buttons and it'll transmit it. Or if you're calling CQ, you can just hit a button and it'll continually send CQ over and over until you stop it. This other one over here is an Arduino-based CW keyer. Has sort of the same types of functionality, but it's actually interfaced to a PC as well. So that's how I send Morse code. I would have the PC send it, type it into the PC, and it would use this keyer to actually do the dots and dashes that the radio would then send out. And it's got a whole bunch of other functionality too. I've also got a scanner over here, which is a receive-only radio. It can scan through a bunch of frequencies real fast. I used to listen to like the police and fire and stuff like that, but a little while back, Longmont decided to encrypt their emergency services, so I'm way more limited on what I can hear with it now. But it's kind of nice to be able to listen to, say, a whole bunch of repeaters, or listen for traffic on a whole bunch of repeaters at once, or on monitoring some railroad frequencies and stuff like that. A radio like, say, a Baofeng is going to scan maybe, I don't know what it does, maybe 3 channels a second, and this one probably does 70 or 80 frequencies a second, so it's a lot faster than even the typical radios that you've got. Another thing I wanted to mention that we found real handy, right down here, our insurance agent was giving out these big desk calendars, so it's kind of a desk blotter type thing. It has calendars on it for advertisement purposes, but what we use it for is taking down notes. When we're operating in, say, a contest, maybe we need to go and we write down the guy's call sign and stuff, and then we come back and work him later, or make some notes on what sequence number he's on, or even log entries. Sometimes you're listening to somebody, so you'll write down the information, their call sign and stuff. Then you try to contact them, and you're not able to contact them. So instead of having an entry in our logbook that we have to cross out, we just take notes on this thing. So that's been really handy to have. I've also got a notebook over here for notes as well. And then this is the shelving above on the HF side. We have the HF radio and stuff down here. Above that, I've got my tube amplifier, and it's an older one, so it actually has knobs you have to adjust. It's not one of the fancier, newer ones that automatically sets itself. Over here, I've got an automatic antenna tuner and a dual needle SWR meter. And up here, it's kind of hard to see. I've got an old Radio Shack radio that we used to take with us on trips, or a Radio Shack CB. I've got it hooked up to just an antenna that's sitting on a sheet of metal over inside the house, and I don't think I've ever picked up any transmissions on it. So I don't know if that's due to CB not being used that much anymore, or if I just have a really bad antenna setup. These 2 radios up here are Kenwood HF and VHF receive-only radios. So I got one of these early on when I started getting into amateur radio, and another one came up at a pretty good price on Craigslist, so I kind of bought it as a backup. I don't end up using these all that much, but they can be useful. If I'm doing something on HF on this radio down here, I can tune one of these to another frequency of maybe a station that's working other people, and then I can hear when he's free and go and work him. So this is kind of the having a lot of pieces of hardware version of what Ron can do with just his flex radio and his computer. So I kind of went to the other extreme of having a whole bunch of separate pieces of equipment. Up here's another old scanner radio I picked up at a garage sale for cheap, and a couple of audio control boxes here. And then this is below those VHF, UHF satellite radios. I've got a Raspberry Pi with the display sitting down here. I'm probably going to use that for doing some software-defined radio stuff, maybe some scanning or weather satellite reception. I've, of course, got a Google Home Mini here, so I have to let the government listen in on what I'm talking about and stuff. Actually, it can be a little bit frustrating. A couple times when I've been running net control for the Hamlet net, it'll just, I'll say something and it picks it up as its command word, and then it starts talking, so it can be a bit of a hassle. Here's Kat's CW key, her iambic key. And over here is basically it's a voice keyer. So it kind of does the same thing as I was mentioning with that CW box, but you can actually record voice messages into it. So for example, calling CQ, your call sign, or a contest exchange. Again, this is something like in the Club's Go box that has a 7300. That radio has this functionality built into the radio as well. So I've kind of got all the old school stuff here when everything was separate, whereas there's a lot newer equipment you can go out and buy. This was my first amateur radio project here. It's just a project box, a big metal box that I put a ammeter and a voltmeter in, and then it's got a bunch of power poles on the back that I use for power distribution. And then up here, I've got a old analog stopwatch that I use when I'm running the nets to, make sure I don't exceed the 3-minute timeout timer, or also to keep track of the 10-minute ID timer. On this slide, I won't go into it in too much detail because I assume we'll have all these slides on the web page afterwards, but it kind of shows my signal path for my HF station. It starts at my radio, goes through that matchmaker device, then there's my Yaesu amplifier, comes out of there and goes to a Radio Shack power and SWR meter, then into an antenna tuner, and then out of the antenna tuner, it's got 2 antenna ports on it. One goes to a G5RV wire antenna in the backyard. Another one goes to a switch, that either goes to a 20-meter end fed, or this other one should be a dummy load. So I can switch into that if I'm doing test transmissions or not. Normally, I haven't used this amplifier very much. Most of the stuff I've done has just been with the 100 watts that the radio puts out. But I did pick this up at a ham fest and figured it might be useful for getting just that little bit of extra signal out, but I haven't messed with it too much yet. This is above, here's those 2 receiver radios. So above that, I've got another radio I picked up for free from a friend. It's just a Radio Shack receiver. I've got a little call sign, LED sign that Kat got me, but the batteries in this sign, in the remote for this sign, and those undershelf lights were dead. And I can't get a battery quick nowadays, so they're turned off. Here's a couple of those antennas I talked about. Here's a dual band mag mount antenna just stuck on the top of this radio, which has a metal case. Here's a smaller antenna. It's a little mag mount antenna that came with that USB SDR radio. So I've got it wired up to there. A couple of dummy loads over to here. And then this thing is a CW transceiver that I think Kat won in one of the drawings at a LARC meeting. We haven't used that one yet, but I think it's just a single band. I believe it's 40-meter radio, probably QRP. So we'll have to play with that at some point. Then kind of back on the left side, I've got an area up here for my HT chargers and then a little bit of storage for HTs. That's one thing I did. Again, you probably get the hint that I kind of like all the equipment and playing around with it and speccing it out and buying it and that sort of thing. So I ended up with a whole bunch of different HTs. Well, on the downside, none of the microphones are compatible with each other. The chargers are all different. So I don't know if I suggest that as a way to go if you need multiple radios, but it has been kind of fun to play around with them. Of course, I have a clock over here, useful for logging and stuff like that. A couple more scanners that I've had since I was a kid growing up that I plan to hook up to a discone antenna up in the attic, but I haven't put that up yet. Here's another one of my dual band radios. This one also includes D-Star. I haven't used it for D-Star yet, but at least have that capability. And then this is underneath the table. What I have here's the power supply I've got for my station. It's a pretty big Astron 24 amp linear power supply. So as you probably know, or some of the new people, a linear power supply has a really big and heavy transformer in it. It's got some pretty big capacitors. The benefit of it is that they typically don't generate any type of RF noise out of them. The downside is they're real heavy and they're not very efficient. So I had a smaller switching power supply before, and again, this one came up kind of cheap on Craigslist, so I thought I'd give it a try. This box over here on the left is a battery box, so it's just a plastic box, and inside of it I've got a sealed lead-acid battery. And the reason you'd want a battery box versus just a battery sitting out there is like, say, if you were to drop a wrench or screwdriver or something, it would be just my luck that it would short across the battery terminals and make all kinds of sparks and noise. So by putting it in a battery box like this, it kind of isolates the battery terminals and stuff from that sort of thing. I have no idea if the battery were to leak, if it would actually contain that. Probably not. It's got a couple of things on the front that you can't really see that much. One of them is it's called a super power gate. And what it does is it allows the power supply and battery to kind of function like a UPS that you would get for your computer. So when there's AC power coming into the power supply, that power is routed through to my radios, and it charges up this battery that's located in the box. If AC power goes away, then this will switch over to having the battery supply the power to my radios. So I've got some emergency power here. Also, this battery box, I could take it and operate portable, although it's a lot heavier than the BioInno batteries and stuff. So you get a little bit of a workout doing that. And then across the bottom here is a rig runner, which has some fusing and power pole power distribution as well. Okay, and then antennas, we're also located in an HOA. Luckily, ours isn't too militant about doing inspections and things like that. It's pretty much only if people complain about things. So we've got a G5 RV antenna. It's actually a G5 RV Junior, which is a little bit shorter antenna. I think it's about 75 feet end to end, whereas a full-size G5 RV, I want to say, is something 130 or 135 feet. So this one pretty much goes edge to edge across our backyard. Here's the center insulator for it, and you can see the actual elements of the antenna. They're this thin black wiring. They're really hard to see. Obviously, this was in the winter, so the leaves are all down off the tree. When there's leaves up here, it's even harder to see. It is fed with ladder line here for a portion of the antenna, so that's a little bit visible. And we essentially just have up here a tree strap going around one of the branches, and then a piece of paracord goes through that, and we use that to hoist up the center insulator here. This is a view a little zoomed out from that, so looking up from the ground, and you'll notice you can probably see the ladder line over here, but as far as the center insulator of the antenna is right there, it's very hard to see, and I believe that black thing you see is actually the tree strap that's holding it up, not the antenna insulator itself. So, even for people that are in HOAs, you might be able to set up something like this, especially if you can, set it up when there's not a lot of people around watching you and that sort of thing. Although one thing that gives us away when it snows, that ladder line, now we've got it, it's running horizontally, so it builds up some snow on it. And what we did for the ends of the antenna, since they're attached to two trees, we didn't want to fasten them, statically to the trees because they wave back and forth. So what we did is got a tree strap and ran it around a branch. And then this thing here, it's kind of hard to see. It's kind of one of those, it's a metal chain link, essentially, instead of a pulley. I was concerned, since I'm using this thin paracord to hoist the antennas up, I was kind of concerned with a pulley that it would, if it jumps off the side of the pulley and gets wedged in there, that we might have a problem. So with this, it's all smooth metal. It seems to slide over it pretty good, and they're stainless, so shouldn't rust. And then so we have our antenna element, and then it transitions to an insulator and then to this paracord, which then goes down, and we have these hanging planters at the ends of it. So the trees, if they move back and forth, these planters are able to go up and down and kind of equalize the tension on the antenna, so we don't have to worry about the antenna line snapping. And that's worked out pretty well for us. I know Chuck made some like this that he was using out of, I think they were PVC pipes with concrete in them, and those would probably work pretty good as well. These baskets have deteriorated being out in the sun, so we'll have to replace them. The other place that might give you away is actually getting your feed lines out of the house. Unfortunately, the room that we're using for our Radio Shack is located up on the second floor. We have this long feed line here coming from the second floor window and going down to the ground. That is a little bit visible if you're looking for it. It's not too obnoxious because the coax isn't very thick. I suppose you could paint that and it would blend in really good. To get it out of the house, instead of drilling holes, we made, and I've got a bigger picture here in a second, but a homemade window pass-through. So we opened up a sliding window, put this board and pass-through in it here, and then closed the window on it. Coming off of that, I've got two coax lines here. And then what I did is I hooked up this other line. It's a piece of paracord, and what I did with that is cable tied the coax to it. I was kind of concerned that just having the coax hanging out of the antenna connector and then going down this whole distance would put too much weight on it, and it would tend to pull out of the connectors or something. So that's what that is. Just put a little loop here for some strain relief. This is an inside view, so this is kind of zoomed out a little bit. The board goes all the way up a horizontally sliding window. Zoomed in a little bit, I've got two SO239 pass-throughs that I screw my antenna feed line from the radio into this side, and then on the other side is the coax going out to the antennas. I went ahead and installed a couple of bolts here with some wing nuts that I can use if I ever have a open wire line that I want to feed outside. I put some copper sheeting on the inside and outside to essentially connect the grounds of these together. And then there's another screw here for a ground connection. Now, the downside of being on the second floor, you know, for an RF ground, if I were to run a cable all the way from the second floor down to a ground rod in the actual ground, that's going to be a really long wire run, you know, probably 20 or 30 feet. And that's going to, at some frequencies, that would most likely act as an antenna, and you'd get RF on it and it would cause problems. So far, I haven't had any RF type issues that having some sort of RF ground would solve, so I haven't needed to ground anything. So I've been lucky for that. Also, as we tell the students in the class, you know, do as I say, not as I do. I don't have any lightning protection currently installed on this. We saw Ron's setup when we went over to his house for some training on the Go Box, and it looked really nice as far as the lightning protection. I've got a couple of polyphaser devices. I've got some ground rods. I just need to install them. So I will probably put those in at the base of this window to use for lightning protection. And then this little thing at the top here is just that eye bolt that goes through that I have the paracord attached to. And then around it, you can kind of see a little bit down here, and we had to put some on the back side of the window. We just got some air conditioner insulation for the window-mounted air conditioners from Home Depot or Lowe's, and use that to seal up the windows. Even with the storms we've had, the wind, the cold and stuff, I've come upstairs and haven't felt any kind of drafts or anything. So this is kind of a nice thing, a non-destructive thing that you can do. We did have to make some holes in the screen on the other side, but figure that's easy to fix or replace, a lot easier than holes in the wall. Okay, this is the pass-through. I mentioned we have some antennas in the attic. So what we did is the room that has the radios in it, it's got a closet with some doors on it. In the back of that closet, I just made a hole in the ceiling, covered it up with one of those plugs that you see in desks a lot of times so you can run cables down them. Then we've got our coax cables here, and then a random wire antenna, which was the first antenna I made for the first radio I got, which was one of those Kenwood receivers. I just took a long piece of Ethernet cable, twisted pair, cut off the ends, and then pulled out the individual twisted pairs and soldered them together in series. So I just have a long piece of cable here, and I just run that up to the attic and lay it on the floor of the attic. And I am able to pick up some HF. Obviously, it's not as good as the outdoor antenna, but it is okay for picking up strong signals or possibly listening to my signal to see if it's you know, splattering or overdriven or anything. This orange cable here is a piece of paracord that we ran through the attic. So hopefully if we have to run any more coax up there, we won't have to crawl around quite as much to do it. And I have to give I guess they call it a shout out nowadays to Kat. She was the one that crawled through the attic and also the one that climbed up the trees outside to help run our antennas. So she's been extremely helpful for all of that type of stuff. Okay, so I guess I'll take a breath there. Does anyone have any?
There's a couple of questions in the chat here for you, Brian.
Okay.
One of them is, how do you provide so many needed AC power sockets?
That's a good question. It's probably non-code like. So we actually have, when we had the house set up, since this was going to be my office, I was thinking more computers, networking equipment, stuff like that. We had them run an additional 20 amp circuit up to here. So we have the normal circuit that you would find in a room here, and then we have a separate dedicated circuit for 15 or 20 amps, I forget which. So I do have a little bit more available amperage that I can use for all this stuff. I've also got a desk up here with another computer, some monitors and stuff. Unfortunately, I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, I think 3, maybe 4 outlet strips connected up to those 2 sets of outlets. So it probably wouldn't pass a code inspection. Most of the stuff, except for that linear power supply and the amp is the other problem. Those are probably the two big current draws. Most of the other stuff are things like the chargers for the HTs or some dedicated power supplies for some of this other equipment that's very low power, low wattage. So I'm not too worried about that. I do have a little device. I forget what they call it. I think it's they call it a kilowatt. And you plug it in to a outlet or to some power source, plug a extension cord or your device into it, and then it'll tell you what the voltage, the current, the power, all of that type of stuff is through that device. So I've got one of those hooked up so I can kind of monitor. My biggest concern was that amplifier because it pulls quite a bit of current. It's able to be set for either 220 volts or 240 or 115, 110. I've got it set for the 110 since I don't have a two-phase outlet up here. So that would cut the current draw a little bit if I would set it up for a bigger outlet, but that would require running another circuit up here, which wouldn't be convenient at all.
Another question I think you might answer, but you may want to elaborate a little bit more. Goes, you have a lot of equipment there. How do you power and avoid overloaded circuits? And I think you answered most of that by testing it. Do you also document what the current draw is on all of your equipment so you can make sure you don't overload your circuits?
God, you guys are just trying to make me look bad here. You didn't ask Ron all these hard questions. But no, I don't. So far, I've been more the plug and pray type of thing. With that kilowatt thing, I am able to monitor. I've got that plugged in. Basically, a power strip from the wall goes to that. It's plugged in, and then all my stuff is plugged on the other side of it. So I am able to monitor it looking at that. But no, I didn't go through and add up everything and run it off of that. On the 12-volt side, I also, let's see, on that, I don't have any kind of metering set up on that. So I'm not sure what kind of current requirements there are from my 12-volt supply, either the battery or the Astron linear power supply when I'm operating radios. Typically, we only operate one radio at a time. Maybe the UHF and VHF radios will be on scanning, and then we're talking on the HF radio. So it's not like I've got all these radios up and transmitting at the same time.
Another question says, do you have a ton of different antennas or a bunch of switches? You have a lot of individual radios, and hopefully I think you answered that you only really have 3 or 4 antennas.
Yeah, antennas are definitely one of the weak points of my whole setup. Like I say, we've got the G5RV and a inverted L end fed antenna installed outside for HF stuff. And then I've got the egg beater antennas, a 70 centimeter and a 2 meter antenna in the attic. And then I've also got a dual band 70 centimeter, 2 meter antenna that I use on, the main radio when I'm working nets and stuff like that. All the other antennas I have are just mag mount antennas that I got originally to use on vehicles, but they were kind of spares. So I've just put them on, either a filing cabinet or a big metal sheet or on top of a metal case radio and use those. I'm sure that's probably an extremely bad setup. Although I will say I was recovering from some surgery, and again, the ham shack's upstairs. I was hanging out downstairs. So I got a mobile radio and a power supply and a mag mount antenna, set it on top of our piano, kind of had a metal thing for a ground plane, and was using that to check into the nets on the LARC repeaters, and it was working great. So you don't have to have, a big fancy setup like, Ron or me or all the stuff Chuck has. You can get by with just a very simple setup and, be successful with it. Obviously, that antenna is inside, so you don't have to worry about any HOA type restrictions. So that's definitely doable.
And I see one more question here. You notice that the snow affects impedance on the ladder line?
I don't, and actually, I do have an antenna analyzer, and I, metered out the antenna on all the different bands and saved those in the analyzer. And one time when it snowed, I wanted to check that and see, hey, is it going to change the resonant point and stuff? And when I went to hook my antenna analyzer up, it wasn't working. It was giving really bogus readings, and ran the self-test, and it failed. It turned out somehow it got damaged. I don't know if it was, we were taking it into the classes and passing around with the students and stuff, or if maybe it just got zapped somehow. Obviously, antenna tuners or analyzers are very susceptible to any kind of static discharge, or if you, even a wire antenna, like with snow and stuff, it'll pick up an electric charge. And if you don't have something that's bleeding that off to ground, If you were to plug it up to the antenna, that could zap it as well. So I had to send that off and get fixed, and I haven't gone back and remeasured it now that we have some snow. So probably next time it snows, I'll try and remember to do that and maybe report back as to whether that makes a difference.
All right, that's the last question. All right.
Okay, great.
For here, and next is going to be Mr. Mark Skelton. Should be able to take over, Mark. And
Okay, let's see if I can. You hear me all right? Let's see. Yeah, become the presenter. Let's see if I can get my second screen here. We'll try to do that one. Okay, you see my screen out there? Let's see, what do we have here?
be able to share it.
Yeah, I did share. You should be seeing a picture of my cat. Let's make sure that we're seeing that.
We still see you, buddy.
Well, let me go back to sharing again.
Unless your cat has a mustache and glasses.
Yeah, well, okay.
There we go. Now it
Okay.
looks like you're sharing it. There you go.
Yeah, I couldn't let Chuck, just have the cat. So mine gets lazy in here when I'm in the ham shack, and sometimes she wants to get on the keyboard and things. So I, have taken, I took about a 12-year break from amateur radio. So I got rid of all my HF gear and a lot of my equipment. And about 3 years ago, I got started back into it and started collecting some equipment. It takes a while. It doesn't take long to get a lot of different projects and not complete them. So my shack is still a work in progress. Just like the presentation, I just got some photos. I didn't have enough time to get them into a PowerPoint, so I'll just kind of randomly show them, show a little of the stack of the shack that I've got here, and just keeping in mind that it's still a work in progress. So, when I got back into it, usually one handheld will be enough. I got back into it for DMR, and I've also needed a radio for Part 90. So I've got some VHF, UHF handhelds that I use. I do events. Some of them do require a Part 90 certified radio. So I've kind of migrated to the commercial type radios. So the radio in the middle of the slide it's a 900 megahertz, it's P25. And I really enjoy using the P25. A friend of mine has got a pretty extensive system here on the Front Range, pretty much from Fort Collins down to Pueblo, down to Methodist. So the audio quality is real great. So I've got to figure out, get rid of some handhelds. I do have a TH74 with APRS that I use sometimes, but I'm trying to keep myself from buying any more handhelds at this point. What else do we have? HF, let me pull that over. So my shack, rather than to duplicate equipment, especially with HF, I decided that to go ahead and build a Go box. That way I could use it in my shack. I could take it in the car and go somewhere. I have taken this Go box to field day a couple times when we go up to South Park. And it's still a work in progress. It took a while to put together because I really didn't know what I wanted. But for HF, the IC 7300 was the big part that I kind of put in. It was the first new HF rig that I'd had in a whole bunch of years. I started with a FT8800 for VHF, UHF, and I'll run it with for packet. Below that, I've got a UHF Motorola DMR radio. It does have the front panel programming on it, and it seems to work well. I've got a packet TNC below it. I don't have one that does PAC-TOR. A DC power supply, a lot of the same pieces that Ron has demonstrated with the Club's Go box, a couple speakers in there. And like I say, it's still a work in progress. So kind of in the middle section, I do have meters I'm going to put in. I'm working on some audio circuits so that if we're doing a field day, that two people can have a headset with an intercom and, one can operate. So I've found a kit, aviation intercom that I'll probably put in that whenever I get back to some of my projects and to try to complete some. I've been spending a lot of time with work, plus putting the club's repeater together and working on some expansion for that. On the top is a 900 mobile, and currently I probably use that more than anything. Let's see, what else do I have here for some pictures? The antennas, it's kind of hard. I did get some pictures. All my antennas are currently in the attic. I am HOA restricted. I am on the HOA board, so I'm trying to work my way in. But I did try to request to put up an inverted V, and the HOA manager thought it would be no problem. But we've got some we've got some people here that have nothing better to do than complain about it. So my inverted V was disapproved, and I'm going to try to probably do something. Probably try to put a mag loop in the back, similar to what Ron has. I've got a place for it. The IC 7300. There's a modification that you can do to control the TR switch. So since my antennas are inside, I have 80 feet of wire that kind of goes to the apex of the house, 20 feet per side. It goes down to an SGC tuner. It was working really well, fairly quiet, but after we had a lot of the hail, I think we've got some issues with some solar panels that are noisy. I have not had a chance to, first of all, shut all of my stuff off to make sure I'm not generating noise with some of my cameras and some of the internal things to my house. So the project for my antennas, trying to get away from my annotation here. So I can get rid of this screen. How do we stop annotating, Chuck? Oh, I don't want that. There we go. So when I started the project in the attic, the original intent was to cut Comcast because I got tired of paying for TV that I wasn't using. So the project started with putting a TV antenna in the attic. And so that's what you can see here. That progressed into, well, why not put up an X50 in the attic to go into, well, I need to wire some Ethernet ports in the house. And now while I'm doing that, I might as well add some cameras. So I spent a lot of time in the attic. My better half was basically started calling me Attic Boy. Let's see here, find the other picture. So this is, you can see two of the X50. You can actually see that there was one base of an X50, a second one, and a third one. So I have three X50s in the basement. Two of the antennas I have coming up into my shack, which doubles as my office, which I use during the day when I when I do work at home. So I, rather than have my equipment in the basement, I wanted to be able to enjoy it. And the third antenna was kind of an afterthought. So I'm playing with built-in repeaters. I've had a LARC receiver in the basement for a while. So it gives me, something to do, but it's all in the attic. Luckily, I have a fairly tall attic. Let's see. Up here, because I need for timing for a lot of the RTCMs that we use in the repeaters and I use for remote receivers, I did put up a GPS antenna in the roof as well. And this is, as you can see here, I kind of built a stand with the 80 feet of wire that's in a loop that comes down. It ties with standoffs. This is the SG237 tuner. It's all automatic. 12 volts in, and I do have a reset switch in my shack. Everything is going through ground for a polyphaser. I do have, a ground that goes from the SGC, winds down, and I went ahead and drilled holes in the wall to feed it to the wall. So I do have a ground in the shack. All of my coaxes, they either go to the antennas. I have a ground that goes in the backyard under the deck. I've driven 2 8-foot ground rods. I also have a piece of coax that runs out to the deck that I'm going to play with some ham sticks or mag loop or do some things. So again, it's been kind of a work in progress. I need to get back after it with some of my other projects and some of my other builds. So for working with the repeaters, I do have a 5 gig dish here. I'm tied into the backbone, the same backbone that the LARC repeater is on. This is a 5 gig that shoots up to Lee Hill. So I've got a lot less latency. Unfortunately, my neighbor across the street has a tree that's blocking it. So I get about 7 months of use out of this dish before, once the leaves start coming on, where they're coming now, I've got about another month, and I'll disconnect it until the fall and rely on VPN to get into the backbone and some of the modern monitoring of the LARC equipment. And the last picture is I do kind of the workroom. It's a mess. I do have some projects that again are not completed. The 2 repeaters at the top are we're in the process of interfacing them. They will be going to Lee Hill, and they will be providing a transmit source for the UHF and VHF repeaters from the Hill. We'll be able to steer whether we want those to transmit or the ones at the Justice Center. I'm building, some DC powered servers that we run for the control for the Asterisk system. So this is just kind of the setup where I make some of it happen in the basement, and it's a little colder in the winter, so that's how come I opted to put my ham shack upstairs. So that's pretty much what I have. Sorry I didn't get it into PowerPoint.
You're good.
It was kind of a last minute deal when I read Chuck's email. It was like, oh, I spaced it out. So anyway, that's what I have. If we've got some questions for you.
Yeah, I got some questions for you on the chat. One comment, pretty cat, and then a question is, what's the helicopter about?
The helicopter is about I am a commercial helicopter pilot. I'd always wanted to do it. My better half said do it. So I went through and got my private. I went through and got my commercial. I was going to do some mountain flying. That's when the company decided to go belly up, abscond with some money. I wanted, the goal was to let somebody else pay for me to fly and do tours. So flying helicopters was fairly expensive, and that was part of the reason I had come out of my 12-year hiatus. The better half said I probably should get a hobby that is less expensive than flying helicopters. So that was the reason that I got back into radio from the vacation. This particular photo that was on the screen, I had an opportunity. We flew from here, ended up down in Casa Grande, south of Tucson. We were doing some survey work, going out, making measurements, basically registering satellite imagery to Earth. It was a competitor for Google Earth. So this was just one of the places that we happened to land for some of the work that we were doing.
Okay, I got a couple questions here. How much power do you run to the attic antenna? And is there any concerns with arcing or fire?
It's the radio itself. It's 25 watts on a strict key down AM. It is a 100-watt radio. I haven't really worried about any of the the arcing. I did elevate the tuner. That's the feed point where it's got the high voltage. So yeah, it's a concern. I haven't had again, it was the best that I could do, and if we did everything, and yes, you've got to be safe. You've got to be considerate. All of the wires is on isolators. It's away from the wood. But if you wanted to make it totally safe and everybody's rules and whatever you find, you might as well go back to a dummy load and not do radio. So I'm not as happy. I think the antenna transmits, but like I say, with the noise, it's a little discouraging. I do have one of Ron's mag loops that I'm going to put on the deck and play with. And if I like the performance, I'm going to go ahead and get one of his pixel loops that he got from DX Engineering, put it in the backyard. I won't request from the HOA. I'm going to probably put a birdhouse on it, and it's going to be some kind of a religious symbol. But that's kind of what I want to do with the receive. Ron's also got some whisper transmitters that he's offered when I get caught up on my project to actually put on my transmit antenna to try to get a feel for how it works. So I've got a lot of different irons in the fire and things that I'm working on. Somebody always seems to have another project. Currently, I've been asked, I am like Ron, I am a part of Aries Archery D2, which is Weld County, part of Oxcom. So I am involved with that. So recently, I've been voluntold that I'm going to be doing code plugs for Kenwood radios. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that, updating the code plugs, not only for the additional things and repeaters that RM Ham is putting up, but also working on some zones and some things for some of the Aries work that we do.
Right. Another question is, how expensive is the software and programming cables, boxes for those Motorola HTs?
Motorola HTs, there's some hoops, and I've got information. You just tell them that you're a club and you go through the Motorola. It probably takes about 3 weeks to do it. The software for everything that's legal up and up, it's $150 for 3 years. That's 3 years of software updates for the Motorola radios. It's all of the updates for the CPS. Once you've got the CPS, you can run it on unlimited number of computers. We are amateur radio. We typically run 25 kilohertz spacing. So there's a training that you do with Motorola online that basically says, thou shalt not program 25 kilohertz in a commercial channel. and the entitlement keys for that are free. So basically, it's $150 for 3 years, everything that goes with it. Cables, it depends if you want to go with the one with the Motorola, or if you want to go with the aftermarket that you can get on eBay, but they're less than probably $100. The little small IC 3500E, it's just a cellular USB cable for that. Kenwood is a whole different ball game. Their software is you have to order it with a wideband. It's a software that it's one license per computer, and if you happen to drop a hard drive on a computer, there's no way you can get your wideband entitlement key back.
Got another one that says, how far apart are the X50s in the attic? And any issues with transmissions overloading radios on the other antennas?
Yeah, they're about 6 or 8 feet apart. I find that I do get a little bleed over into some of the other radios, so I try to run a lot lower power. I don't always have all the radios on at once. Usually the one in the middle is a receive antenna, for something downstairs. So I do notice a little bleed, but it's the best that I could do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate that. I got my video up, so I'm going to run the video. I didn't even show off my shack yet, who's presenting this. And then I have some pictures from people who donated pictures of their shacks. And then we'll call it a night. So I'm going to go ahead and share here again. And I got to change my audio, so stand by 1 second. Run the video. Share the screen. And let's try this again. Can everybody see my screen now?
I can.
Okay, here we go. Well, welcome to my backyard. This is my antenna setup here. As you can tell, I have a octopus system dipole. I only got 2 bands up right now, 20 and 40. And then on the edge of the house, I have my UHF VHF at Fong tri-band. And then I have a 1090 megahertz antenna up there as well. And below that, I also have my NOAA weather satellite tracking antenna made from tape measures. So I do live in an HOA, so all my stuff is kind of put up with like buckets, things like that. I also have an inverted V dipole. Kind of hard to see a little bit, but there it is there. It's up about probably, I'd say, 15 feet or so, maybe 16. It can come down anytime in case people complain, but so far nobody's complained. And then I have the wire running down along the ground here, and everything goes underneath my porch, and then comes up the backside of the wall. And then I have a box, waterproof box, where all my cables connect into. As you can tell, the dipole is running along the edges here. You kind of see the wire running down. Then I have it connected. This is going through a tree, and then it hangs on the edge of the fence. Now we go back inside to the ham shack. Can you hear me or no?
Just barely, Chuck.
Audio
Must
now?
be having. Yeah, it's a little better now.
Okay, yeah, it's the way you switch this when you go to change your audio, and it, WebEx just kills you. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pin me up here to everyone. Let's see if it has me up here. It should. I'm trying to get my picture up there. Can everybody see my picture right now? Up on the screen.
We're seeing your ham shack picture is what we're
There you
seeing.
go. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around my shack really quick and give a virtual video tour. So what we have here is my computer station. This is where I'm running everything for the event tonight. And this is where I do most of my major computer stuff. I got all my drives up here, things like that, my USB that I'm using for tonight, my little ham shack thing, and I have an extra monitor / TV up there. This is my main desk. Now my office ham shack is a little bit more populated than it usually is because I'm working from home. So I have another TV up here, and my kids, when they visit from Illinois from their mother, they stay in here and they'll be watching a TV, playing a video game, and doing like 15 different things because I've got monitors all over the place. This is my temporary table that I have right now for my work computer. I've been playing with some satellite stuff. So this has been messing with that. Over here, of course, my ham shack itself is I have 6 Raspberry Pis. 2 of them are doing, one's doing FlightAware, one is doing Flight Radar 24. So I'm tracking airplanes. One's also doing NOAA weather satellites. One is an application called Pi-hole, which is a DNS blocker. So I'm keeping a lot of traffic off my network. And then I have another one called Yodeck, which is a messaging type software for the Raspberry Pi that I'm playing with. So then I just have storage for a lot of my ham stuff and miscellaneous things. And this is the actual radios that I have. Well, some of the radios I have. So I have my radio station up here. So that does, when I start to play with digital, that's how I play with digitals with that. I have my mobile is out of my car right now since nobody's using the car, just sitting out front. I didn't want to leave it out there. It's actually a DMR. It's a TYT. I believe it's the thing they call it 5800, but it's a tri-band DMR radio. Nice little radio. I really enjoyed it in the car. It's a lot of fun. My HF rig is an older 897 D Yaesu. You can tell here. I've got my little sound box here. I've got my YT100 tuner box. And you kind of see down here, I got all the wires, and that's where they run outside to the antennas. Here, when I'm on the nets and listening to and running the net on Tuesday night, I use my little TYT 7800, just a simple little dual band radio. Works really nice, plugged to my Ed phone. And then I usually, I don't have it up here now, but I keep a band plan up here, and then I keep all my stats from QRZ because I can never remember my grid square and things like that. Last but not least, here's my satellite antenna that I was playing with. A lot of people who came to the satellite presentation would have seen this. We did it. Then I have a shelf, kind of like Mark and everybody else, stacked with HTs. So I've got my BTEC, which is a DMR HT, my TYT, which is another DMR radio, and I've got just a little cheap Baofeng, another little Baofeng, and then I have a CS 70, I think it's 7750, which I believe is the UHF DMR, and then hiding over here in the corner, you can barely see it with the little flashing lights, is my DMR hotspot. So that is K0ITP's ham shack, my home away from home. So now let's go ahead and look and see what other people sent us. And I want to thank everyone who participated in this evening and who sent me some pictures of their ham shacks that they were willing to share. I think it's nice to do that, and people appreciate that. So the first one we have is Mr. Schmidt, N0OUW. Everybody knows Jerry. We've seen his shack a couple times on Thursday nights because he's been playing with WebEx as well. So he'll probably do that again tomorrow night if you want to watch him do the WebEx presentation. I'm sure he's going to go out there and show you his stuff as well again. John Kennedy sent me a picture of his ham shack. Thank you very much, KD0JPE. I see a couple of looks like a HT there, and looks like a small oscilloscope and HF radio. So a nice little setup. It doesn't have to be major. It doesn't have to take up a whole lot of space. It's whatever you make of it. Pat, W1PGE, sent me his. His is still in progress since he moved to the house. I know he's still building on his a little bit. But he's got a bunch of HTs in the corner. Looks like he's got HF rig there, and I know he's got a vertical up in his, I don't know if it's side or backyard for doing HF. And last I heard, it was doing fairly well. Looks like he's got the band plan up there on the wall, so he's set a little notebook so he can document his stuff. So there's another one of Pat's. Looks like just a desk area. Don Lewis sent me a copy of his as well. He's got a couple of radios on there. Nice HF radio, digital there, Yaesu. That's what is that? Can't tell the model number from here. I don't have my glasses, but you can see a signal link up there for doing digital stuff, and I know he does quite a bit of digital. And he's got a couple of other, looks like maybe a UHF and a VHF radio also there. There's some speakers and power. There's another view of it. And I know Don does a lot of digital FT8 stuff, so you see his FTX screen up and running, and QRZ and tracking people down and see where they're actually coming from. And again, another ham for a long time. Put that band plan up there because you never know, and you want to make sure you stay in your frequencies. Keep yourself out of trouble. And Jack, WM0G, sent me a couple as well. He's our ARL Colorado section manager. This, I guess he has some older equipment on one side. He put in his email when he sent it to me. So it's definitely some older equipment and stuff that Brian would like with all the individual knobs and things. Nothing newer there, it looks like. And then here's his newer equipment that he sits at his desk. So he's got a couple of nice, looks like a nice rig there. I can't tell if that's a Yaesu or an Icon, probably an Icon. But Jack was nice to send a picture of his ham shack as well. I'm also going to add some additional links. There's some YouTube videos. There's a page that I found that has ham shack information on it. But again, you know, the thing about a ham shack, it's what you make of it. If you want to just sit there with an HT, that's fine. You can call that your ham shack. You want to go out and put, you know, a bunch of older equipment and some newer equipment and build out an entire room or an entire basement, God bless you. Go do it. Have fun with it. You know, around here, unfortunately, there's a lot of HOAs. There are some people that are fortunate enough to have, you know, acres of land that maybe could put a tower up and pop out 1,500 watts. We can't, a lot of us. So, you know, I stick to my 100-watt pushing, but, you know, I moved my antennas around this weekend and reorganized them, and been in contact with a guy doing a Georgia QSO party this weekend. And he was about an hour and a half north of Atlanta, and he was coming in like he was right next door. So, you know, propagation is getting a little bit better on certain days. And just keep an eye out on the heat websites, and also just keep your ear out there and go out and scan and play around. If you're a newer ham and you're only a technician and you can't do a lot of HF stuff yet, and there's some digital stuff you can do, but you know, if you want to get something new and make QSOs around the world, you can start playing with DMR or D-Star or Fusion or something like that as well. So that's all I have. Let me bring up just the page and see if anybody's got any questions. Let me share here really quick. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat and let me know. Let's see here. So did everybody see my presentation and everything? So it looks like, yeah, I think I made myself the presenter. Comment of a clean shack, John. So yeah, and again, thanks to everybody who participated in this. So this is a last minute thing. And then kind of go from there, because again, we were looking for something that would be of interest to everybody, that I could get everybody involved, and it would be more of a visual type thing. Based on COVID-19, I know we're currently still under order, I think until the 26th of April, but I know California, as of this morning, they've extended theirs to May 11th. I was talking to some folks, my peers out there from the company I work for. So based on what's going to happen here, we don't know if we're going to be any longer or shorter. As of right now, and I'm going to discuss it with the board, and I think we're going to probably try to do at least one more virtual meeting just to play it safe. Even when they do lift it, I know a lot of people probably won't be comfortable going into a crowded room. I've got events for another organization. They don't want to go out for at least 45 days to do events. So there's going to be some more lag even when everything's lifted and things start going down. So as of right now, we'll try to do this again. We'll try to put another interesting meeting together for everyone. I do thank everybody for joining. And, I know we missed the socializing part of the meeting, but unfortunately with this COVID-19, there's not a whole lot we can do. This is kind of the best effort that we could do. So thank you, everyone. Everybody be safe. Remember the CDC rules, wash your hands, don't sneeze or cough on people. If you're feeling sick, stay home. Watch out for fevers, things like that. For, our folks that are in certain brackets that are potentially more susceptible to this than others, do take care of yourselves. I try to monitor the repeaters, and I know a lot of people are monitoring repeaters. So if you need some help, get on the radio, ask for it. I'm sure if somebody's listening, I'm more than happy to help you guys out. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Be safe, and we'll see you next month.
Hey, Chuck, before you close it, I've got a couple of quick, announcements or comments. One is this weekend is the ARRL Rookie Roundup for SSB or phone. So if anybody is interested in getting on that, the idea of those is people that are kind of in their first 3 years of being licensed or of using HF. They can get on that. It's kind of a little contest and stuff. For those of us that have been in longer, they still get points if they talk to us. So if you like the idea of maybe working some brand new people or relatively new people to HF, that might be a good thing to check out. The second one, I guess a comment from the education committee, obviously all of our test sessions are canceled or put on hold at the moment. We've been keeping an eye on all the posts from various groups that are trying to do things online. The only one I'm aware of that's actually doing anything right now, if you go to hamstudy.org, there's a link or a button kind of in the upper right. You can click on that says find a session. There's some sessions there that are advertised as GLAARG. I don't know what group that is, but they're doing remote test sessions. I believe they're still kind of trying to trial it. So each session only has one candidate at it. So I think they scheduled the sessions for, 45 minutes long, and then you have to have a webcam, and there's some other requirements. But if you're one of those unfortunate people that's kind of stuck trying to get an upgrade in or get your license, you did all the studying, you might want to check those out and see if you can get in on them. I've seen a couple of people on Facebook groups that have mentioned that they've gone in and followed the process and they were able to get tested. The FCC is still processing the licenses, so they got their call signs. So just something to try out if you're otherwise sitting at home bored. And that's all I had. I think that was a great meeting, and thanks for everyone that presented or sent in your pictures. That was awesome to see all that stuff.
Thank you for the presenters, especially. You made my job a lot easier. Any other questions or comments before we close it up for this evening? All right. Thank you, everyone. I will stop the recording now, and Kat, I will get that to you as soon as I can. And we'll kind of go from there. But again, thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.